Hello, hello. Holy cow, what an incredible day for the podcast. Let me just hop over my co-host Max the Cactus. Today I am talking with Paul Jenkins, the just legendary comic book writer from Spectacular Spider-Man, so on and so forth. Yeah, he wrote The Web Slinger, The Wall Crawler, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I just wanted to say I love the incredible uh, battles that he made between these characters. He worked with Humberto Ramos, the artist, for a large part of this Spectacular Spider-Man run. And oh my gosh, what a great day! All right, so all right, let's bring him out. We're gonna meet the man, the myth, the legend, Paul Jenkins. He's written Spider-Man. He created Sentry for the Marvel Knights line. Um, did a Eisner Award-winning run on Inhumans, I believe. I hope I'm not messing that up. And I believe he's with DC now. Just an incredible resume. So here he comes. Hey, can you hear me?
Well, how are you doing? Yeah, I can hear you just fine. You hear me okay?
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, very cool. Um,
I'm setting up a microphone for us so that I got better quality mics here, so I can just
oh,
get a.
good call. I kind of lucked out with the mic on the computer, but I do want to upgrade. I just got a microphone recommendation. Actually, you wouldn't be a bad person to ask. Do you recommend a certain microphone?
I mean, it just depends, right? Like if you're talking about like one that's like specifically a USB desktop microphone, then I don't know as much as some people do. I'm just trying to get. Let me just get my preferences right. Because I don't use them right. I actually use like a breakout box and a sound card and stuff, and then I put a high quality like studio mic into it, right?
Right.
Um, but you can tell me. I've either got this sound that you've got right here, which is really just the computer sound, uh,
Uh-huh.
or I can do. Let's see.
You sound good. You sound good in my mind. Uh oh, you actually just cut out there. It's yeah, you're nothing's coming through just now. Shoot.
All right, then
What
I'll
about
just go back. I'll go back to the built-in microphone. Then this should be fine, right? Is
yeah,
this
yeah,
okay?
I can hear you now. Yeah. Best laid plans type of thing, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I have I have very very long days. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, about 5 a.m. I work, and I am a part owner in an NFT company that's like flying right now. We are with a bunch of ex Disney people that I've worked with. We're all starting up a new animation studio.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I've got my own company here in Georgia, and I'm also making a documentary right now. So there's a lot going on, and the funny thing is, I don't really do comics. Most people know me for a lot of comic work, but it's something that I sort of I love the medium. I love the form, but I don't really do comics. I was never
Wow.
really a comic book insider, but yeah.
Uh, that's news to me, man. You've done insanely large runs on several titles, and you're like one of the first three guys to work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think you do comics a little bit, but so
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot. I've done a lot of comics, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I don't really. Um, you, you know, I didn't plan on comics being my career, certainly, and I did a lot of them. Obviously, a lot of the work I did helped Marvel kind of come out of bankruptcy and all of that. But a large part is because I'm not a comic guy that they had me come in and really bring a new thing. Because I don't read a lot of comics or anything like that, right? So, I came in and did some stuff, and it turns out that what I did was good, probably because I don't know that much about comics. So I could come with a fresh voice for certain things, and they would never say no to me because they needed the work to be done. So yeah, but I mostly work in. I've done a lot of game design, a lot of work on video games and new media storytelling. So I'm working in NFTs. I've done all kinds of stuff. You know, I'm that guy. I can't work out what I want to be when I grow up.
Well, terrific, man. I'm definitely game to learn about your your new world, basically. I could kind of tell that you were. Oh, that's cool. I could kind of tell that you were sort of uh yeah, like there was some writing about you that you were always interested in film, and you were sort of acting and writing
Yep.
and directing throughout the years.
Yep.
And as a matter of fact, I was very curious about this web series that you made, sort of on the sly, really, called Shelf Life. You know,
Yeah. Good.
I didn't even really find out about it until I started like really like doing a deep dive about you, and like, you know, it's this 4 season web series that did pretty well. I mean, it's got about like 10,000 views per episode,
Yep.
and D. Bradley Baker, you know, the famous voice actor from Avatar, The Last Airbender, so on and so forth, does the voice for one of the characters.
Well, you know, Yuri Lowenthal and Tara Platt and Travis. So they're all well-known voice actors. I actually voice direct quite often, you know, because I work in game design. And so I mean, I do everything, man. But we can talk about it all. We can get it all going in our thing. I don't know how you want to do it, but we can go whenever you're ready.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. We're rolling, but I'll cut down some of the
Oh, I didn't know we
some
were
of the.
rolling like that. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I can see recording now, so I didn't realize we were going. Okay, I'll put
No,
on my.
all good. I do a little intro, and then before the person hops on there. You know, I actually have some. I don't know. Some British people are okay with this, some aren't. But I gotta tell you, my mother's English. You know, and like, and you know, and then my grandparents on both sides are English as well. And so you came from England, and now you've wound up in Georgia, I found out. So how'd that kind of come about?
The specific reason for me ending up in Georgia, you know, after I did Ninja Turtles, and then I was
Ninja Turtles, you were in Massachusetts
yeah,
somehow, right?
yeah, I was in Massachusetts, and I met the guy that created the Ninja Turtles, and so I worked with them for a while. Then I went away. I was the editor in chief of a comic book company, um, two of them, and then they didn't work out. So I came back to Massachusetts, and I thought, well, you know, I want to kind of. I used to be Alan Moore's editor, right? And
Wow.
sit with
Whoa.
Alan, and I talked to him about his work, and I thought, you know, the way Alan does it is sort of the way I think about stories, and I was relatively disappointed with the standard of storytelling in comics, and you know, I had trained to be a storyteller and an actor, but also, you know, does like work in film, and so you know, I just decided I would break into comics, and I did it in a weird way. I went to San Diego Comic Con, and I met the editor of Hellblazer, a guy called Lou Stathis, and I had
All
heard
right.
that they were looking for a new writer, and so I asked him if I could write the book, and he said, "Well, what have you written?" And I said, "I'll be honest, I've never written anything before in my life," and so I tried out for it, and 6 weeks later, they gave me the job.
Wow. I've literally never heard that story before. That's insane. Yeah. I mean, what happens when someone from Comic-Con walks up to you? They know that story, because I think they'd be pretty jealous, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was weird because there were so many people trying out for that book. Because Hellblazer is a very prestigious book, you know. But I was sort of a punk. I didn't really realize that I couldn't do it. You know, no one can do
Right.
that. So I went off and did it. It's sort of like a weird thing. Well, I mean, you know, I didn't know what I couldn't do. So I will say that quite often in my career, people tell me I can't do something.
Yeah.
And I always feel that that means that they can't do it. And they're just telling me I can't do it because they don't think they could have done it, you know.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know,
I can kind of understand where you're coming from there. Well, let's style it out a little bit. So really, you were just like, you look at this guy who runs Hellblazer, and you're like, no, really, I haven't written anything before. And then
yeah.
what happens next? He's just like, well, all right, or you know, like,
No, he I think he was just sort of somewhat confused by. I mean, he was a great guy. Lou was a wonderful guy, right?
Right.
And he said, okay. I think I was the right person at the right time, but I mean, my understanding was like Warren Ellis wanted to write the book, and all these people that were established in the comic industry, and then this idiot shows up and goes, "Can I write it?" And so Lou let me write a sample script, and they worked with me for about 6 weeks, and him and Karen Berger, and then they said, "You're it." And I
Wow,
went,
man.
and it's funny because my reaction was a little bit like, "Okay, that's what I tried out for. What do you think it was going?" But I didn't really,
Yeah,
I
right,
wasn't
right.
arrogant.
Absolutely. I
Okay,
actually kind of know what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, like sometimes when people like, they're like, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" And you're like, "Yeah," like, um, great attitude, definitely. So what was the storyline for your first Hellblazer?
well, my storyline was going to be something different, but they needed me to get the character out of Australia, actually. So I wrote 2 issues about the Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime, which I liked. But it wasn't really my story. It was kind of trying to extract him from where he had been so that I could just get to my work. And so a lot of my work, I grew up in the countryside. I lived on a farm. Um, and
Whereabouts, just for like, where in England, what countryside?
Yeah, so when I was a little kid, I lived in Kent in England. Then we went down to Dorset in the West Country.
Okay.
My dad. So here's the thing that people don't realize about me is that my dad left when I was 5 years old, and my mum is a unique person. Let's say that. And I basically grew up in a house with. If the little house that we moved into had no electricity in it, right? So we would pay 50 pence if we had it for electricity, and if not, it was dark. Didn't have
Wow.
any food, didn't have any money. There's no way to live, but we made it by picking food and just getting by. And then I lived in a caravan for a while. I was homeless for a while. Like, I really come from a really, really incredibly sort of difficult situation.
Wow.
But I didn't even notice it, to be honest. I sort of didn't care. It was like, well, okay, so we didn't have any money. Yeah, I think the only way that my brother and I noticed it was that our friends all had toys that we didn't have.
Right.
And but we had a few little toy cars and a bike and a football, that I'd kick on the back wall and just knock it on the back wall all day and run around a farm. And so what's really funny about it is many years later when I wrote The Origin of Wolverine, the very first issue of that is called The Hill, and it's all about like the kid at the
Right.
bottom of the hill looking up at the farmhouse with all the lights, and that's literally my story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so cool, man. I mean, well, it's not cool per se, but that
Okay.
the way you handled it is incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I watched part of your first episode of these incredible. You have like a series of incredible long talks with the creator, one of the co-creators of Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman.
Yeah.
And of course, I am well aware that Peter Laird is a part of that soup as well. I flubbed there, but yeah. So you have this long series of talks with Kevin Eastman, and in the first one, you talk about sort of that you were like playing soccer or something, and you like tweaked your foot, and then you asked Kevin Eastman for a job. I was like, who is this? Who is this guy?
I didn't
Yeah,
tweak
and
my foot either. I didn't. I literally broke my ankle. I broke it in 3 places, and I had just big bit of metal put in it. And
yeah,
I've been waiting on tables and playing with a band, right? And so you can't go playing with a band, right? So there's no way to do that. Couldn't really wait on tables. So I went upstairs and I knew the guys from town because they did an album cover for my band. And
uh-huh.
I kind of went upstairs and said, any chance I could get a job with you? And they're like, yeah, we're really busy. So I just walked upstairs and got a job with the Ninja
Yeah,
Turtles.
that's so fun. Yeah, we really and they were putting out the 1989 classic film that I have
Yep.
probably watched recently, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Um, Incredible. And I gotta say, like, um, watching that movie now, just seeing the facial expressions on the turtles, even when they're not like they're not like the focus isn't even on them on camera, and like the amount of business that they're doing is just out of control. it's a
Yeah, so
it's a great.
you put that down to the Creature Workshop and Henson because he was on it and he knew what he was doing. So and sadly he passed away as we were doing it. So that was really sad.
Did you get to see him at all, talk to
I
him?
did not actually. I never met him, but the guys did. But he was a
Right.
good person, and they liked him pretty much. So yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, well, a lot of my friends are talking stocks right now. So if you want to, give some tips about this NFT you're doing, I'm all ears. Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot going on. The NFT business is really good, and we're doing very well. We're on the Wax blockchain, and the Wax blockchain is doing pretty well too because I think we're helping it grow. I mean, I can't say much to people. I'm not an expert on blockchain particularly. I kind of am now. I get some understanding, a modicum of understanding about it. It's very much to do with um, you know, Bitcoin obviously is the one, and Ethereum's doing well, but there are smaller ones like I think we're going to go work with a flow chain, and we're going to work with we're going to continue working with Wax, and so we those smaller, some of them are really hopping right now. Now NFTs are doing really well because at
Hmm.
the moment there's a bit of hysteria, but there's a long-term play for NFTs. They really hand some of the opportunities back to the creators, and I think that's important.
Terrific. And so you're running this NFT through Meta Studios?
No, no, it's a company called NFT Genius. I'm a part of that. We really specialize in. We have a project called Bitcoin Origins, and Bitcoin Origins is a very strong project for Wax. We've actually done really well with it. We sold out. I think last time we did a bigger drop last time. The last day of it, or the last one of it, literally sold out in less than a second, which is actually done 3 times in a row. So
Wow.
people are pretty ravenous about our content and what it is that we do. We have a treasure hunt that is part of what we do.
Oh,
There's
cool.
a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
That's cool. So I'm having a hard time picking where to start, but so you yeah, right. So you said you know, you're kind of all day every day at this. Like how are you structuring your day? How much is NFT? How much is video game work? How much is the sort of studio work making
Yeah.
these cool films?
The answer is yes. I mean, it's that it's the NFT work is a lot of it. It's exploding right now. We're doing really well. We've got some
Right.
new investors that are important to us. They're investors that they're all people that you've heard of. They're very wealthy and famous people. They love what
Wow.
we're doing, so they come in, and we've actually got a lot of offers right now from people who want to come in on the company. We can't really do anything with it. But at the same time, I'm actually making a documentary right now about fandom. There's a lot of toxic kind of behavior in fandom, and I think there's an interesting story to be told there. Because I think that it's very much you can sort of draw a straight line between the toxic fan sort of behavior, and especially the sort of grooming of other people, and the language and the techniques that are used, the gaslighting techniques and stuff used against fans, are the same techniques that we see destroying our society, right? You can kind of draw a line between all of the problems that we had recently politically, and all the disagreements, and people, they won't like, they won't learn how to disagree. Now you take that to fandom and you realize it's just a microcosm of it. Like someone will say, well, the Green Hulk is the best, and someone says the Gray Hulk is the best, and what that's fine. But when bad people come in, when really toxic people come in and they start manipulating it to work for them, that can be a problem. So we're doing a documentary about that with my company Meta. We are, I'm also, we're building out an animation company right now that we're doing. So, there's a lot of new stuff going on there. And so one of these days, like I said, I will work out what I want to do when I grow up. But at the moment, it's everything.
That's a really cool idea for a documentary, though. Is this your first documentary work?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've never done a documentary before. I think it's really interesting too. It's a little bit of detective work, and it's a little bit of you know as a reporter, really you're acting as a reporter, and it's different muscle, right? But you're trying to gather
Absolutely.
evidence, trying to kind of show how you're trying to get a premise and like explain it and show how it works and all that kind of stuff. So it's challenging, right? It's challenging to assemble it. But, you know, I do know, one of the ways that I approach it is I'm not actually going to draw any conclusions, right? I'm actually going to kind of interview and find out some things as well. You know, and the
Oh yeah.
reason you can say that is you take a group, um, you know, that's like really active or something, and they seem very like angry or something online.
Right. Oh.
You understand why people are angry, right? You understand like what they're annoyed about and what it is that's frustrating for them, and then if you understand why people are angry, you can actually kind of understand how to tell that story better, right? So it's very indicative of the fact that in our society we don't listen to each other. We, you know,
Yeah.
if someone is a, you know, I'm not going to get into politics too much because I don't really do politics. But it's almost like if someone is someone who voted for Donald Trump and someone doesn't like Donald Trump, which is kind of understandable, he's a bit horrible. Um, then there's no forgiveness. There's no, well, you voted for Trump, so now I'm mad at you, or you voted for Hillary Clinton, now I'm mad at you, or you voted for Biden. And it's sort of like, listen, we used to know how to disagree, and part of these techniques that these politicians use against us is to weaponize our cognitive biases against us and make us angry because it feeds them. They are the ones who benefit from it. And in the meantime, all the people around, we're all like, we're getting poorer. We don't have any money. That, you know, we're getting angrier. We're getting
Wow.
easier to control, and all because these techniques are being used, right? And what amazes me is that some of the leaders of these fan groups and fan films and fan projects, they are the same manipulators. They manipulate people really badly. So I think that's going to be fascinating to kind of show the story of how this can happen, you know?
That was really kind of a great essay. I think that was great. Seriously. You know, I got to tell you, like, I am trying to, because I've sort of gotten lucky and I've gotten to talk to some people about some interesting political topics. But you know, it's journalism in a way. You kind of want to be the fly on the wall. But you know, I did. You know, I like some of the stuff Bernie was saying. You know, like, and you know, so I really you know, I was really trying to be involved in the 2016 primary
Yeah.
between Bernie and Hillary, and I just got so furious, and you know, and then so I pulled back for the main election. You know, tried to not just be mad all the time, and then the day after the election, I was actually in a situation where I was at this little like outdoor bar thing, and I wound up talking to someone who was Republican, I guess, had voted Republican, you know, and I was like sort of immediately in that situation of like, okay, like I need to prove to myself even that I can talk to someone, you know, with different ideas than me.
Yeah.
Um, but I got to tell you, at the time, like I didn't really know, you know, I didn't know about this Mike Pence character. I wasn't hearing very good things,
Yeah.
and you know, as a matter of fact, I heard from Rolling Stone that he used to have a talk radio show, and I'm just like, why on earth would you leave a talk radio show to be such a strange version of the vice president?
Right.
I don't know, but
I know. I
that's
mean, I don't fathom it, right? I don't do it. I don't do the politics. I don't care. You know, I grew up in a punk era in Britain, right? Like I could care less about politics, right?
right.
But I think the part that we see is that politics isn't necessarily politics. It's actually like psychology and it's various things like that. It's not politics. It's actually psychology. That's what we're talking about. Human psychology, people getting angry, people being frustrated, you know, all of that stuff. And so that's weaponized against the population. It's always weaponized and it always has been. And it was very much weaponized in the last ones that we did. So, you know, um, you don't necessarily see it coming. You just you deal with it, and that's the best that you can do. So I
Yeah.
don't get into many of these conversations because I don't care. Like I care about people, and but I don't care about politics. And I think that's what they do is they make you care. So
Yeah.
that's actually the parallel that we're drawing is that, you know, there are a lot of people that are very vulnerable. There's a thing that you have to understand. You know, I actually did a TED talk about this, which is about people's cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance. The brain if you have a long held belief, right? If there's something that you think is real,
Right.
then you're going to believe it, right? And no one's going to change your mind. And it's becoming more and more true with the false information that we get on social media, right? You are constantly assailed with ideas, and so you pick the ideas that you like, and you don't pick the ideas that you don't like. And we tend to do that because we're now in echo chambers. So imagine that you believed wholeheartedly in the Loch Ness monster, right? And then I showed you a picture, and I said, "Here's a picture of the Loch Ness monster," and you said, "That's wonderful." And then I showed you a picture of exactly how I faked it. It would be very difficult for you to accept that it was a fake. In fact, you're more likely to say, "No, no, no, I'm not telling the truth. I didn't fake it. The Loch Ness monster is real." Now, which one of these is true? Is it likely to be the Loch Ness monster is real and I faked the photo, or is it likely to be, pick one? And it's much more likely to be that I faked the photo, right? But our
Right.
brains let us think that kind of stuff. They don't, and so we end up struggling to allow our biases to overcome some of these things. So that's a lot
Yeah.
of what the documentary is about, and we're busy in it right now, probably on it for the next 6 months, amongst all the other things that I do.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that myself. Yeah, we went into politics a tiny bit. But yeah, your punk origins, that's pretty cool, man. So you were in a punk band. Do you remember any of the song names, anything like that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, Shadow Season. I don't know. I mean, we used to play with the drummer from the band Dag Nasty used to be our drummer, and bass guitarist was at Juilliard School of Music. So we had a good band, right? We actually opened for Jane's Addiction one time, which was kind of cool. So
Yeah.
we did okay, but I was never going to be a musician for a living. It's
Nah.
difficult, right? It's
Yeah.
like I studied to be an actor, and I wasn't really into being an actor. I actually preferred writing content and directing it. So
Right.
I studied acting. I was much more likely to. I spent most of my time in film school just learning how to do it.
Yeah. So how'd you wind up in Atlanta anyway? From England to Massachusetts, then Atlanta.
Yeah, so it's a typical story of mine. I got into the business because I broke my leg. Around the late '90s, I broke my neck. I was playing football, and I got hit really badly. I got really badly injured, and
Wow.
I started dealing with vertigo really badly. And the cold weather in Massachusetts in the winter just killed me. And so at a certain point, I kind of almost like gave my stuff away and just said to everyone, I'm out. And I got my Blues Brothers cop car and the dog and the computer and went, let's go and see what happens. And I got back to Atlanta, and I quite liked Atlanta. It was good. It's where they did a Dragon Con, and I thought, well, I like this place, and I'll be here for a minute and see where I want to go next. And I thought maybe not likely California, because I'm not really an LA guy. I've lived there a couple of times, but I wasn't into it. It's not my kind of place.
Sure.
But I didn't move on. I met my wife, and we had two boys, and I love it here. It's nice. Georgia is a real big filmmaking capital, and that's really good now. So I've chaired an advisory committee for the governor on digital interacting and filmmaking. So I've been involved in stuff here too.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Because when I was started doing, I did some research for this interview, and your first credit was for like a 24-hour film festival in Atlanta.
that's fun.
I thought that was really cool. That's cool that you sort of contributed in that way to the community.
I can tell you where that came about too. I think it's quite funny. Yeah. So one of the things is that I do care about creatives. I do care about the creative community. I did a
Hmm.
24 and a 48 actually, both in to meet some people and to see what they're doing. And there wasn't a massively high standard of content creation. There's not an expectation of excellence in some of the people, but some of them were doing fine.
Hmm.
But there's a great exercise in making 48-hour film. I mean, you got nothing, and 48 hours later you got something. That's pretty cool, right?
It is cool.
So it's very hard to do, right? And you got to get a group of people together. You got to do a really good job. And it's funny, actually. I actually think it's quite an examination of human nature that some people cheat and they film a bunch of stuff beforehand and then they assemble it. And it's like, why? Why don't you take the exercise, which is so wonderful, of having
Totally.
nothing and making something within 48 hours, including having no idea, no script to begin with. Just you start with nothing. They give you a category and you go, let's think of something, and you get it made. So I think it's really cool to have done, a couple of those. And what we did was we often nurture and encourage people to do well. We love to do that. We really like to encourage people. So my company Meta, like META, actually stands for Media, Education, Technology, and Advancement. So we really care about education. We really care about advancing the creative community, and we actually walk the walk when we do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've, you know, again, doing the research, I pretty much went down a Paul Jenkins rabbit hole, like so, and like, yeah, there was some Atlanta community thing, and you just do an hour long talk, and like, not
Yeah.
a lot of people have even seen it yet, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to save this video. There's like a wealth of information here.
Yeah.
It was something about like ITs and writing for video games. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely ready to go to school, man. But I gotta ask you some of these Spider-Man questions
So let's do it. Yeah.
after.
Let's talk
All
about
right,
Spider-Man. Absolutely.
awesome, awesome. Thanks so much. Let me. Oh shoot, I might have moved some stuff around. Here we go. All right, so in Spectacular Spider-Man, this I'm gonna do like two or three of these in a row, but
It's okay.
so
I can remember the issue.
excellent. Spectacular Spider-Man. You take Spider-Man to face off against a lot of the classic villains from the books. You go through Green Goblin, you go through Doc Ock, Venom, love the Venom story, and the Lizard, and however many others. But I want to get those first three on the board here. So Spider-Man and Green Goblin are having their final showdown. Green Goblin has really been breaking Spidey down psychologically in this arc that you wrote, and Green Goblin is basically wants Spider-Man to kill him. Green Goblin wants Spider-Man to kill Green Goblin, or Green Goblin is going to kill Aunt May, and Peter is truly distraught over this entire thing, and they're fighting, and finally, Peter Parker just backs off. He backs away from the fight. He like yells like he's just had it, and he goes and sits up against the wall. Green Goblin gets up and sits down next to him. They start talking. They're telling jokes, stuff like that. Honestly, like it was. I just loved it. I had never, like, just the notion that they know each other well, that they've fought before, that they have this crazy relationship as hero and villain. How did you think that up? Like, when did you think that up? Were you like, I have to do this, all that stuff?
I thought of that years before. We had been given the task of bringing the Green Goblin back, and um, and I am not a fan type person in comics, right? I'm more like, who cares? Why do I need to bring it back? What's the point? And if it was just for money, why write that story? But what they did in those days was I had written the Inhumans and we won an Eisner, and they hadn't really won one in a long time. They said, you can do anything. And I think they thought I was going to do Spider-Man, or say, I want to write the X-Men. And I'm like, I want to write the Sentry. And I had pitched the Sentry to them for years, and they
Right.
rejected it constantly. And they said, oh,
Oh
that's
wow.
a stupid book. All right, fine. They said, let me and Jay do the Sentry. And that was successful. So they kind of said, okay, and so it's a funny thing that I had turned down Spider-Man for 2 years before. I actually spoke to the editor, Ralph Macchio, and he had asked me a couple of times, and I wasn't interested because I didn't think there was anything for me to say, because I didn't understand the character, right? The
Wow.
reason I didn't understand the character was coming out the Clone Saga and all these things. I'm like, it's just a big mash of continuity. I don't even get it. It's like, who does what? Why aren't there simple, one and done, single issue stories? So at a certain point, they brought me on and they said, we want you to do it. And then one thing they asked me was, can you bring back the Green Goblin? I'm like, yeah, I've done it one. I mean, the answer is always yes, right? But
Mm.
it's like, will you let me actually do it with something that means something? So actually, very unknown to people, I actually wrote, I believe, the almost a definitive origin story for the Green Goblin before I ended up writing that story. And it was, I think, issue 20 or something. 25 maybe of Peter Parker Spider-Man that I did.
Mm.
And what it was, the premise was that the Goblin, as a young boy, is mistreated by his father, and his father wants him to be strong and become the heir to the Osborn Empire. And so he takes him to a house in the middle of a storm, and he locks him in there in the middle of the night. And the
Wow.
kid is so traumatized by this. But what he says to Spider-Man is, it's not the darkness that I was afraid of. He said, I'm walking around this old haunted house, basically, and I'm terrified, and I'm by myself, and I'm 7 years old. And he said, I could hear a goblin like chittering around me. I could hear this
Wow.
goblin running around me. And I knew it wasn't the darkness I was afraid of. It was the flashes of lightning, and I knew it would be standing in front of me. And it
Oh
so
my
traumatized,
gosh.
it turned him into, really turned him, right? So the premise of that story was that he, at that point, wanted to get Peter Parker to be as dark as he is, because he recognizes the two of them are same people. But Peter Parker's gone this way, and he's gone this way. And what the Goblin said is, I'm the only one who's honest. Like, we both have borderline personality disorder, and we're running around in spandex punching each other. And I'm
Yeah.
the only one who realizes that we're crazy. And you
Right.
won't accept it. So there may be some truth in that. And I feel that's like how you write good villains, is to kind of almost understand how they feel. So that was one that, Joe Quesada called me. He's like, Raimi was making that film, and he's like, we like that story, like, so they used a little bit for the, and then a few years later, I was working with Umberto, and I said, look, let me just write this story. And it's, the Goblin comes back, and he basically gets Peter, and he knows his identity,
Mm.
and he basically dismantles his life, including getting his friend Flash Thompson at the time. Flash is now his friend, and
Yeah.
he's got an alcohol problem, and he plies him with alcohol, sticks him in a truck, points him at Peter's school, and crashes the truck into the building, and he sends a
Right.
message to Peter Parker, right?
Right.
It's pretty difficult stuff. It's really, really intense psychology. And Peter kind of goes to a public speech of Norman Osborn and stands in front of him, and there's such tension, because it's the Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, but to anyone else, it's just two people talking, and they
Right.
clearly don't like each other.
Right.
So they have this final thing, and basically the Goblin says, here's the deal. I've locked us in a warehouse. If I get out of here, if I beat you, I'm going to kill your family, all of them.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got snipers on a roof right now that if I walk out that door, they're all under orders to kill your family.
Right.
And the only way you can stop it is to walk out of that door ahead of me, and you have to kill me. And I'm going to turn you into a killer, because I know you're a killer. And if you kill me, you will be the heir, because my son is useless. You're going to be the Green Goblin.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
You'll be that person, because you will have killed at that point. So they have this massive fight.
Yeah.
And they just take each other out. And at a certain point, I always feel that, like, two things about a villain. One is that you got to you almost kind of can agree with the villain's point of view. You just can't agree with their methods. You can almost understand them, but they kill people. They're bad people, so that you can't understand what they do.
Right.
And the second part of it was that maybe at that moment, that was the moment where they realize, we are like each other. And so they sit down. They're both exhausted, and they sit there, and actually what it is that the Goblin says, I wasn't always going to be the Green Goblin, honestly. I was going to call myself Mr. Coffee. And they crack up laughing, because they're so tired and they can't fight anymore. They've had it. And so they crack up laughing, and then the laughter dies, and then Peter tells the Goblin the thing that kills him. He ends the fight forever with the Goblin, because he says, listen, you know what? I can't stop you from killing my family, but what you want me to do is hate you.
Right.
So he tells this anecdote. It's relatively recent in the story, and he tells an anecdote where, his wife has come down in a plane, because at the time Mary Jane had recently been in a plane crash, maybe, but, we weren't sure. And he says,
Right.
I see this thing, and it's like, I run to the plane, I run to the wreckage, I keep having this dream. And when I get to the wreckage, I find her, and it's never Mary Jane, it's Gwen.
Wow. Wow.
And so when what he says is, Gwen would never let me hate you. There's no way.
Right.
So you can kill my family if you want, but you know what you won't win? You'll never get me to hate you, because I can't, because of Gwen.
That's like my favorite line. He goes, "You can kill Aunt May, you can kill my whole family if you want to. It'll only strengthen my resolve." and then you go like, like just you being you, that's life without parole.
Yeah, that was
What an
good.
incredible, it's like an emotional, like it's like a woke Dirty Harry line or something
It
like
was a
that.
good line, wasn't it? It's actually
It
one of
was
my
great.
favorite lines I've ever written. Like, it just you being you. That's life without parole. Yeah.
Yeah, it was excellent. And so this is incredible, by the way. I mean, I really, it's one of my favorite lines, man. It's great to be able to talk to you about it.
Mhm.
So, do you remember kind of where you were when you were writing it and like stuff like that?
Well, I was living in North. No, I was living down here in Atlanta. Um, I mean, I think the funny thing about
Like
writing.
seriously, I'm like, was it a coffee shop? Was it 2 p.m.? Like I want to know that stuff.
No, I write in my house. I don't really even own a laptop, to be honest. I have a place where I sit, and that's like my thoughts work, and I always write like that. I write very, very late at night because then the world is quiet and I can get my work done.
Right.
So I was no doubt sitting down in my basement with no lights and nothing in the room, and the curtains drawn, and I was just typing away. Because what happens is I'll work, and I will tell about that story and many like it. I'll be
Hmm.
typing and I'll look up and I'm like, wow, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. I didn't realize that, because you're just trying to catch up to what the characters are already doing. And so, yeah, when you write lines like that or moments like that, I think it's just happening. And you lose track of time. I'm very much a planner. So I will get books full of like breakdowns, and I break down my comic work,
Wow.
panel by panel by panel, and then
Wow.
I set it up, and then I type to it. I work to the thing I've already prepped. So most of the hard work is in prepping it, but then you're typing it and you're just listening to the characters talk, and I think they're talking to each other, and you kind of know what they're saying, but every so often you write things and you think, well, I didn't write that. Like, that wrote itself.
Right.
I'd like
Right.
to tell you an anecdote about that. Actually, the very first time that happened to me, I was in Massachusetts, and I was working on Hellblazer, and I was writing a story in which there was a ghost who lived in a house in London, but it was very much a story about my grandparents, Bill and Nellie, right? And they were children of the Blitz. They both lived through the Blitz. My mum was a little girl when
Yeah.
she in the Blitz in London, and
Wow.
doing all of this stuff. And so the story was very much about the wartime spirit and the connection of people. And there's a story of a soldier who goes to Dunkirk. And at Dunkirk, they were told to keep their rifles dry and get on a boat. So it was a really tough thing for the British Army. And a grandfather of a girlfriend of mine, her grandfather was too young for the first war, too old for the second, and he fought in both of them. He was at Dunkirk, and he got put in the sea, and he held his rifle, and he walked in and out of with the tide for like 2 or 3 days. And he was just at the point where he was going to pass out,
Wow.
and he was going to drown. He was just going to die. And as he
Yeah.
got ready to just say, I can't do this anymore, a boat came by and fished him out of the water, and he came home. So the story
Wow.
I wrote in Hellblazer was about a guy that this happens to, and he's the one that becomes the ghost in the story. But he loves a girl, and he can smell her perfume. And the girl was my grandmother, right? It was
Yeah.
Nellie, and he loves her, and he's thinking only of her and the smell of her perfume and the ducks on the water in the pond, and then he's trying to stay alive for her. And um, it was really meaningful to me because I cared
Yeah.
about the guy who did it. I knew who he was. I knew him. I'd met him. I cared about my grandparents and what they went through. And I wrote a
Absolutely.
line, and it was, and he spent all night walking in and out with the tide, uh, keeping his right, walking in and out with the tide, and she stayed there with him, helping him keep his rifle dry, because it
Mm.
was like her spirit was with him as he did it, right? And I
Right.
wrote that line, and I stopped and I started crying, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I didn't even know that line was coming, right? It just
Yeah.
happened. And that's when you're doing something, and it's just, I was surprised. I was like, where did that come from? So, now you start
Absolutely.
learning to trust yourself as a writer, and now you got something to say. So back in the day, they would let me write anything I wanted to, and the Goblin story was one of them. Like, I want them to sit down for a minute, and for 3 or 4 pages they just talk. They can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And that was how funny that of the pieces of that story with all the stuff that happens, that's the bit that you remember. And I used to tell them all the time, it's the
Yeah.
characters that you remember. You're not going to remember who punched who. You don't care.
Yeah. I mean, well, uh, you know, unless you give them all these cool lines and dialogue that like, I mean, you made it, you made these villains unique and you gave them soul, and I definitely really appreciated it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, what a it is a crazy thing, my dad's parents they got moved around during the Blitz, and so uh, I just heard this crazy story about my grandfather after his passing, that the family that he wound up with, they were only supposed to take like two kids from this field where all the kids were laid out.
Yep.
And he became a third kid because he befriended these other two kids on the train or something.
Yeah.
And he
So they were
begged to,
evacuated. He was evacuated basically, and he was sent out to the country so they wouldn't get bombed. It was a crazy
right.
time, man. My mum tells the story. She was a very little girl, but she tells the story of the first American she ever met, and he had a banana and he gave it to her, and she'd never tasted one before, and she was like, "They love the Americans. They love the
Yeah.
GI." Like, except
Yeah.
the joke was, the problem with the Americans is that they're overpaid, oversexed, and they're over here.
how do you feel now? You've
Well,
been here like,
I would tell you this, sometimes people ask me what's your favorite work, and it's very difficult to say, right? Except I can easily say my favorite work from Marvel, and it was Captain America: Theater of War that I did for, it was 4 Captain America stories, all about the love of the American military and the common soldier.
wow.
And I defy anyone to read those and the Mythos story that I wrote and not cry, because they're about every man who is a
Wow.
soldier. My family are the soldiers that die, right? Like my great grandfathers died in the First World War. They got shot up, they got killed, because the average man just didn't make it, right? And
Right.
so, you know, writing about the plight of the common soldier is important, especially through the lens of a super soldier. And I will say that my work on Captain America: Theater of War is my favorite work that I ever did for Marvel, because I think it's the best stuff I ever did for Marvel. And in part, it was because they called me up and went, "Can you do war stories? We don't care what you do." And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, you know,
That is so great. I've been looking for a new great Cap America story. I didn't know that. That's what a scoop. That's great, man. Thank you.
yeah,
Awesome.
Captain America: Theater of War. I did 4 of those, and they're all collected. So read those, and if you can find it, Mythos Captain America as well, because that one was rewriting of the origin, and one of the main characters in it is a kid who bullies him. The kid with the catapult that bullies him on the steps as he's trying to read. This is from the origin, right?
Uh,
That kid, his name is Doug Huggins, and he ends up enlisting with Doug Huggins, and then he ends up going to war with Doug Huggins. And then one day he ends up pinning the Medal of Valor on Doug Huggins, and then in the end, they end up at the regimental dinner. It's only the two of them are left, and Cap is a young man, and Doug is in his 90s, and they're the
right.
only two guys. And he would talk about it. Those boys, they stayed young because they died. They stayed forever at 21 on some foreign field, right? And so Cap had always mourned for his guys, but because of the super soldier serum, he had the privilege of never forgetting their names. So he knew everyone that had served with that had died. And when you get that kind of emotional content, it means something. Well, Doug Huggins was my next door neighbor, and he was on the USS St. Louis when Pearl Harbor was bombed. So we kept him memorialized as a character in Captain America.
Wow, man. This is terrific. Excellent. That's excellent. So you seem really dialed into what these characters are feeling. Did you study psychology, anything like that, or you just kind of you're
Um,
always like that?
I study psychology, right? I think, the kind of writing that I do, the kind of way that I work,
Mm.
I become a psychologist. I become someone that understands or looks at human behavior, the human condition constantly. So I care about it. I care about people. I think a lot of people's bad behaviors and stuff, they're understandable. That we are creatures, and there are some easy things to see in psychology. I didn't study it, no, but I love it and I appreciate it, and I feel like I understand it in a way, perhaps as a writer.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so I'm just gonna deviate from the Spidey questions for real quick. We'll come back to them, but Yeah, I just want to jump over to your character you mentioned, the Sentry. So I mean, what a hero for our time, a middle-aged, out of shape, hero imbued with powers.
Right.
Is that ever sort of circling the cinema at all? Is that going to be a
Well,
movie one day?
I can tell you this. So Kevin Feige is the head of Marvel Films, and I remember
Hmm.
talking to him one time, and he said that is our best film, right?
Wow.
Um, I think the point being that the psychology of it is that he's Superman and he becomes the golden guardian of good and he stands on the rooftop and he has all the illiterate words and he's got the watchtower and the watchdog, as if like Crypto the super dog made any sense to anybody, right? It's clearly like about like this sort of like the weirdness of superheroes, right?
Right.
But what it was about in many ways is about like look at the act of heroism that the Sentry um, that he does. Spoiler alert, the Sentry fights against this creature of darkness, the worst creature of all, the one that even Thor and the Hulk are terrified of, this
Right.
creature called the Void, right? And what you find out is because in his alter ego, he has mental health issues,
Right.
that when he becomes the Sentry, he also becomes the Void and he's destined to fight himself. It's about that conflict that we have with ourselves for the rest of time, right?
Right.
So the
Wow.
ultimate act of heroism is to sacrifice his heroism and make himself forget, so that he's nobody. He's just a middle-aged dude that likes, chili dogs and hangs out, and he's got agoraphobia, and he's been bored. He's been diagnosed as a disorganized type schizophrenic, right?
Wow.
And I cared about the psychology. I think the one thing that maybe I have regret about is that when other people would write the Sentry, I had always, I had said, this is his psychological profile, please read it and please understand that mental health issues are difficult for people, and that if we can stay true to this diagnosis, he's got borderline personality disorder, he's schizophrenic, he has
Wow.
agoraphobia, please understand that this is what this guy, not borderline, sorry, but he's agoraphobic and he has schizophrenia, and there's a real clear diagnosis there.
Yeah.
And people didn't care, they didn't really adhere to that. I think that was a shame, right? Because if you'd have kept doing
Right.
that, it would have really rounded him out, and in the end I think it was just his mental health was used as a story plot device, and that's not what I wanted it to be.
Right. You wanted him to deal with it regularly as
Yeah.
someone in that situation would.
Yeah, you can't
Absolutely.
use superpowers to deal with a mental health issue. You now have to deal with it. So it doesn't matter how powerful you are, you
Mhm.
have to deal with it. And so what we did, it's funny because I did two series of that. Everyone remembers the first, but the second one I felt was more of a triumph because it was very much about, you know, who are we? What makes us who we are? And
Mhm.
in that story, there's a moment that I really quite liked actually, where he's having dinner with his wife,
Yeah.
and they're sitting down at dinner. He says, "Can you give me a second?" And he walks out the door as if he's gone to the restroom. And he comes back. He's got a little bit of mud on him because he's obviously had to fly off somewhere,
Oh,
and he
right, right,
save
right.
somebody's life, and then come back to the dinner. And he sits down at the dinner, and she knows what he's done,
Mhm.
and then she sort of says, "Hey, listen, I figured maybe tonight you could, we could, spend some time. I mean, like spend some time
All right, cool. Right
And
on,
he
man.
goes, yeah, yeah. And he changes back and she's disappointed. And he's like, what's wrong? And she's, I just thought, wouldn't it be, is there any chance it could be him? And it's almost like she was
Wow.
asking him, can you wear lingerie? You know,
Right.
it's a really interesting dynamic between two people that he's like, I didn't know there was a difference. And she, of course, knows there's a massive difference between the Sentry, who this Adonis like figure, and kind of Robert, who's just this guy she married. And it's almost like she's
Wow.
asking him, "Can you wear lingerie tonight?" Right, and he doesn't get it, and it's really a role reversal in the historic way that we think about it, and and I really quite like writing that because it was a bit of like reality for us, which is his
So
his difficulties were psychological. They were things that would say he wasn't happy because he had superpowers.
right. There's so much there. I would love. I Wow. That's incredible. I don't even know where to start, really. Of course, you know, um, I mean, trying to connect with your partner over a long period of time has always fascinated me. And I could really talk about that for hours. So I'm actually afraid about like how candid I could possibly get about something like that. But
I mean, yeah.
that's incredible that you went there in a comic book, no less. Really, really
Right, in
great.
a mainstream comic book, and that's the thing is they used to let me. I mean, I remember one big, real pushback that I gave to Marvel. And this is a big pushback for me.
Hmm.
At the end of that Goblin story you're talking about, at the end of issue 3 of 4, the Goblin has said, "I'm going to kill your family," and they're right in a sniper's line of fire right now. And there's a single splash page. You turn the page, and he's
Hmm.
had enough, and he says, I'll kill you." This is Spider-Man saying it to the Green Goblin. He's been pushed so far. So
Yeah.
I sent the script in, and my editor, the wonderful Ralph Macchio, who was such a great editor, calls me and he said, "No way, no way, Spider-Man doesn't do that." And I said, "Let me point something out to you, okay? You know
Right.
who doesn't do that? Jesus Christ. Okay, he's all like, I would never turn the other cheek. Spider-Man is a person, and what
Yeah.
makes him a hero is that he's so angry that he says, 'I'll kill you,' and then his better nature, he controls his anger, and he says, 'No, no, no, I'm not going to kill you because I'm better than that.' That's the only way in which he's going to be a hero. And if he doesn't say, 'I'll kill you,' and get angry enough to want to do it, there's no contrast for when you can't see his heroism. And it took a while, right? And finally Ralph said, 'Okay, I kind of get what you're saying. I actually agree with you,' which was great because that's really the bit that people remember.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie came out when I was 11, and living up to Peter Parker is hard.
Yeah.
Like, everybody wants to, totally, absolutely. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so Sentry, oh shoot, I kind of lost my place here, but there was one more thing I wanted to grab with that, but to be honest, I think I lost it, to be honest. But let's double back to Spectacular Spider-Man, your arc with Venom.
Yeah.
So Eddie Brock is diagnosed with cancer, terminal cancer. Venom actually wants to leave Eddie Brock for good, uh, and Spider-Man sort of, you know, he tries to be Peter Parker, and he reconjoins Eddie Brock with Venom at the end of this arc, and Venom is literally just like, "You fool, you doomed us both." We're basically this undead symbiote now. And he leaves, and Peter Parker feels bad. He wonders if he's done the right thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
why should you always have moral clarity? People with moral clarity are scary, right? They know
mhm,
everything. But
mhm.
but there's a way of looking at that. Well, you can say, um, okay, maybe this is a bit heavy, but we'll go down this road, right? Look at
Yeah.
the issue of abortion, right? In America, it is clear that it's very difficult for men to be telling a woman what really choice she should be making with her body, right?
Mhm.
And so that's a challenge, right? There's obviously a pro-choice movement and there's a pro-life movement, and that's what they call themselves. Um, so am I qualified to tell a woman that she shouldn't? Well, I don't think so, right? But let's be careful for a second, because people who firmly believe that there shouldn't be abortions are terrified because they feel that children are being killed. I mean, they in their heart they feel something that is very difficult. So am I supposed to know the answer to that? I don't know the answer to that. I think I do. I think I know where my thought lies. But people that are always talking absolutes and they know everything and they say this is what it is and I'm right and you're wrong. I don't trust any of those people. I mostly know how I feel about abortion, right? But not completely, because I do have a lot of compassion for anyone that feels that maybe it's a life being lost, and how can you reconcile that? Is it okay to say I don't know? Well, of course it is, right? You have to be able to say I don't know. If you know everything, then I don't trust you, right?
I I think that's the most effective thing you could possibly say, especially in terms of whether it's social media or politics. It
Yeah.
used to be okay to say, "I don't know."
I don't know, right? And now it's like, I know this and I know that, and I'm on my soapbox. So at the end of
Yeah.
that story, when the way it plays out is that Eddie Brock, is dying of cancer, and it's a particular type of cancer that secretes adrenaline into the body, and that adrenaline is what the animal feeds on. It's an alien. Now we even get an insight into the alien. It's lost, right? It's been taken from its where it grew. It's part of a group of symbiotes that kind of work off of each other and inhabit other animals. And now suddenly it's on an alien planet, and it finds the only host it can, one that is secreting adrenaline because he has a cancerous tumor that secretes adrenaline. It's keeping Eddie alive. Eddie's keeping it alive, and it's a difficult situation. Along comes Peter Parker. The Venom suit gets the symbiote gets a taste of Peter Parker and says, "I want to eat that. That's what I should be feeding on." Because it doesn't know any better. It doesn't, it's a symbiote, right? It doesn't know
Right.
anything.
Right.
And now Eddie is left to die, maybe. And what the symbiote is doing is it's controlling his movements, making him go to the top of buildings, throw himself off, and as he plummets to the ground screaming, it stops him right at the end, and then it feeds off the adrenaline that's coursing through his body because of his fear.
That's right.
You're talking about some heavy stuff here. This is some really difficult stuff.
Big
and again,
time.
they let me do it because they're like, I don't know what that guy's doing, but get on with it, right? And I just felt like you get to the end of it, and Eddie says, I mean, I felt that there was a moment in it. I went to go talk to a Catholic priest. I'm not really a faith person, right? But I was talking to a Catholic priest, and I told him about that story I was planning on writing, and he said, no, in Catholicism, we don't believe anything that God created was evil. And I said, actually, that's really cool, right? Like, that's kind of
Right.
nice that nothing
Right.
is evil except our choices, maybe, right?
Mm.
So some of it is research, and some of it is audacity and being not afraid to write those kind of things and standing up for the work. And I think that Venom story kind of shows it,
The Venom story is great. I actually forgot about that thing where Venom makes Eddie jump off the building. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did this run with most of this run with the artist Humberto Ramos.
Mhm.
I think his art served your story so well. I think maybe, his characters look so fun. I think maybe that like it just really helped to stay in this kind of like fantasy world probably while you were dealing with these dark themes that of course like definitely when you're young you're reading comic books you you want you want to push the envelope with what you're reading, you want like yeah you want like kind of those questions to be answered, like stuff with like the adrenaline and like all of those little touches that make a great story basically, especially in the world of superheroes. And I just loved so like Eddie Brock has this incredible size in your comic in particular. I mean, he's just huge, he's this like strong guy who's the half of this super being, and he's still as weak to cancer as anybody,
Yeah,
and
because he can't beat it, right? Exactly. And so he comes to the end of the fourth of 5 issues,
mm,
and the revelation, he just says, like, what are you doing here? Spider-Man's like, what are you doing? You crazy? And he says, I've got cancer.
right,
And
yeah.
that moment of just like, yeah, that changed everything,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a great reveal for that, absolutely. And
Yeah.
so that brings us finally to Doc Ock. You made just a really gunslinging Doc Ock. I mean,
Mhm.
he like it's literally like at some point even Spider-Man is like, "Oh, this isn't a game. This guy is really, he wants to win this time. He wants to defeat me. I actually don't know if I can defeat him." Like Doc Ock just beats the crap out of him and like puts him in a river. That's the only way Peter Parker escapes is he like dive, like just gets pulled away by this current. How did you think up that take for Doc Ock?
So I thought of people and where, so Doc Ock is an unusual person. Like I found, what I wanted to do with him, there's all kinds of psychological profiles of people who are serial killers and their passion and stuff like that. And then there's just every so often one of these human beings comes out and they're broken, right? They are not, there is no life in there. There's no care. The serial killer, Ted Bundy, there's a story about him. He obviously did some heinous things. He did some very, very bad things to people. He killed a lot of women. He tortured them. He did just awful, unspeakable things to them.
Wow.
And when he was arrested, he didn't understand why they were arresting him, and he certainly didn't. They put his hands behind his back to cuff him, and he's like, "Ow, why are you hurting me?"
Wow.
He genuinely didn't understand, because he was so broken, and he was always broken in his brain, that he didn't get the connection between the pain that he inflicted on other people and any pain that would be inflicted on him. In other words, he was a psychopath beyond psychopaths. And so I wanted Doc Ock to be that person, to
Right.
not really have any love or life within him that was like anything that we can, no motivations of humanity. Because you could look at Norman Osborn and you could say, yeah, but part of the reason why he did what he did because he loves his son and he wants an heir, and he's super passionate, right? So he
Right.
might be crazy, but he's not
Right.
that Ted Bundy person. He's not the one that cannot understand other people's human emotions. And I
Yeah.
wanted Doc Ock to be that person. I wanted to see a guy with love and compassion, Peter Parker. How do we deal with these psychopaths? How do we deal with them?
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult to see them coming. And so that's kind of the way that I approach Doc Ock.
Yeah. I think Norman Osborn is a really compelling villain right now because he's a CEO. He employs thousands of people, and
Yeah.
he moonlights as a supervillain,
Well, which job description, this is true, which job description is most likely to have narcissistic personality disorder? A CEO.
You heard it here first, folks. All
Sure,
right.
CEOs out there. It doesn't mean to say every CEO is a narcissist. I'm
No,
saying
no, it
that,
does not. Yeah.
it's a high quantity of people, comparatively.
Yeah, it's weird, like, and like there are stories now of like CEOs like quitting their jobs and now they wear sandals all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what to make of it, to be honest. It's just like, like why do you get to wear sandals all the time? Like okay, so that's perfect. That leads me to my back to my Sentry question, right? Is like I think you talked about Sentry like accepting his life of being Robert and like eating chili dogs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Deep down, I think a lot of guys would love to live this idea of a normal life. They just eat a chili dog sometimes, and they just have a job that is like normal, like like a 9 to 5 thing, like in one of those Ramones songs, but it seems so hard for anyone to just achieve that little thing, like and like the alter ego, the notion of moonlighting like a superhero is becoming more and more real, so like
Right.
I don't know what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I mean, I suppose that some of it is autobiographical, right?
Right.
That my life is so complicated, and I do so much. I wake up and I work and I go to bed having worked, and I do it 7 days a week, and I'm only working. And there are times when, I might go like shopping, which for some people is a chore, and I'm like, that's my vacation, is to go out of the house for an hour and a half and go shopping and go down every aisle and not have to think of a story or a problem solve. So there is a kind of a heavy is the head that wears the crown. And I've often railed against one thing at times, because I work in different media and I put out a lot of stuff and people are like what I make. A lot of times people will say, well, you're very talented. And I'm like, stop it, man, stop it. Don't do that, right? Because what that means is I think that means that someone thinks I can, you know, I'm like typing and like watching TV, you know, I'm just like looking, hey, it's a good day. And I'm typing as if because I'm talented, it wasn't hard to do or something. But, you know,
Right.
this whole thing about talent, there is no talent really. It's hard work. And if you have a modicum of social, you know, if you're not maladjusted, if you actually have some awareness, if you're a very hard worker, if you know how to watch people, and if you then add that to this talent potentially, then you've got some talent. If you had talent and you did nothing with it, that's not talent. It's just potential. It's just a piece of the puzzle. And so, you know, I feel like you know, when you're writing about something like the Sentry, I often find what was autobiographical after the fact. You know, you don't realize you're writing about yourself for your audience, because your audience can see themselves in what you write too. So it takes me about 2 years to read my own work. Sometimes I never read it. I've written it and then just gone, I don't want to read that. It wasn't, or I never get round to it or something. I'm not really that interested because I'm on to what's next, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Right on. Thanks for that. Yeah. So what are your go-to snacks? Are you a chili dog guy, or like, you know,
No, but
I
I will
got
tell you that was one of my most audacious last lines of a book. The last line of that entire series with all the things happening is chili dog, right? It's kind of weird. It's an unusual thing to end on. My go-to snacks. I'm a guy. If I've got a snack, it's chocolate. Probably that's it. I like chocolate. I'm all
yeah.
good for that. Chocolate's
That
great.
that's the British
Yeah,
way. So it's
that's
all
right. Yeah, I
chocolate.
mean, it's my wife and kids who are the snack fiends, right? Like I buy snacks and I go upstairs to go eat like one bag of crisps or something, and there's nothing there, right? And it hasn't been there since like 2 days ago. And I'm like, when were you going to save me one? So I don't really snack a lot because I never get any of it. It's like a feeding frenzy in my house when I come in with sun chips or something. You know?
Right on, man. I don't know. I kind of I like doing a little food talk. It's always interesting to me. Very
Absolutely,
cool.
yeah. I'm pretty simple, man. I eat like I know what's really weird for me is that I don't eat a lot of meat anymore. I'll like for dinner I'll eat like oatmeal because I quite like it. I'm pretty simple with food. I don't care about big steaks, and you know, I like simple food. And food for me, because of the way that I am, is very utilitarian. Right? I'm like, I got food and I eat it, and then you know, my epitaph will say, "Here lies Paul Jenkins. He ate when he was hungry and he slept when he was sleepy." You know, that's it.
Well,
Yeah,
that's one of the that's like a Zen mastery thing, which
yeah.
leads us quite perfectly into the Ninja Turtles. So let me know when you're sort of running low on time. I'll just try and like put in 3 more questions or something like that. But all right, so I've read a little bit of samurai philosophy, and I've noticed the Leonardo character really embodies a lot of these traits. From the comic to the film, even the video games. In the first issue of TMNT, Leonardo kills the Shredder, and that's the real way of the samurai. They don't stop until they
Yeah,
kill you. You know, it's like so.
yeah.
How much ninja lore came up in conversation when these characters were being worked on?
I think people see the Ninja Turtles they read more into the Ninja Turtles than was intended, right? So let's be fair about that. You know, Kevin and Pete created the Ninja Turtles, and they did the comic books and they loved it. It was very much a riff on Frank Miller. You
Mm,
know, the Hand and the Foot Clan, right? I mean,
right,
it's
right,
all
right.
about the same thing. And so they loved Frank Miller's work, and they sort of had their homage to it. And it was the Ninja Turtles. It was a cool project.
Mm,
They were in the black and white boom. They sold pretty well, but then, you know, their first print of the Ninja Turtles was like 2,500 copies, right? That's it. That's all they were. And yet, you know, as time went on, you know, the people see it differently. So what I think is quite funny, having been there, is people will say, "Oh my God, I remember, you know, Baxter Stockman, or one of these characters, you know, one of these like it shaped my childhood. The Stingray character was like my favorite character, and I lived and died with that character.
Right.
And unfortunately, I know that it was sort of like a bunch of people sitting around in an office going, and we should do a Stingray. And they go, yeah, okay, that sounds good. And we made Stingray and sent it off to the game. So there wasn't as much intent, not in a gratuitous way, but there wasn't,
Right.
there wasn't this like design to do the way of the samurai. There was, because they, Kevin and Pete were both into that. But more like, the philosophy of it and the whole idea of warriors and honor and stuff like that has been built into the Ninja Turtle lore over time, which Kevin and Pete built in, and the films built in, and all the cartoons and everything. It was all built in, but it's almost like it takes a while to shape those characters. You look at the first books; they're not the same as the comic books that came later, and it's certainly not as the cartoon and not as the film. They're all very different. Including, someone once asked me, you must hate the Michael Bay version of the Ninja Turtles. I'm like, I don't hate that. That's just a new version of them. It's okay. It's like, there's a take on it.
I like the monster look. I really did.
It was interesting. It was a different thing, right? We looked at the sort of 2012 version of the Ninja Turtles 2. That was a really cool cartoon. It was great. It was like, they did really well. And then they blew it around about 2018. They killed it, so it's like, but only in my opinion, right? Like, what do I like? Well, it's the things I like, right? So there wasn't as much of an adherence to sort of specificity as you're saying. It was more like it was being guided and built as it went.
So what about you in terms of, like, I mean, actually it's funny because you talked about your documentary about fandom. Is there anything for you in terms of fandom where maybe you're a little much, and, like, the person could tell you, no, that's not the way it is, and you're like, shut up, it has to be the way that I thought it was, like.
So I'm a weird person in all of this. I work in the, I don't have a fan type mentality. I'm not really. I think the closest I come to a fan mentality is that, I'm a fan of Crystal Palace Football Club in England, right? That's my team. When we play, I want us to win, but oh well, if we don't, I'm not dying. It's not like my one thing, right? I don't, like, if you're asking me who do I want to meet, it's not like Stan. I mean, I met Stan, and also, Stan actually liked my work, which is good. He liked the Sentry.
That's great. That's
but my heroes would be, different. I mean, my heroes are like Pele. My hero is Muhammad Ali, Neil Armstrong, and the Dalai Lama. So I'd like to meet those people, but I would wait about an hour. That's about it. And then if I'm going to wait an hour and a half, I'm not bothered. So I don't really have a fan type of approach to anything.
I think you'd wait an hour and a half for Muhammad Ali, though. Let's be real.
For the greatest, I would have given him an hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? Who else? Hagler, man. Like, I loved Hagler. He was the best pound for pound boxer that ever lived, and he sadly died a few days ago, which is really sad. I might have given Marvelous about an hour and a half of my time, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a book out there called the Berlin Boxing Club. I don't know if you heard about that one, but it's this kid in like wartime Poland, I think, World War II. And he's training in boxing, and he's like worshiping Max Schmeling.
Oh, Max Schmeling, yeah, absolutely.
So cool. And so, and he's sort of, living in poverty, and so he assumes that if he can get to the Max Schmeling level, all of his problems will go away, and like he just like wanders into Max Schmeling's hotel or whatever, and Max is like, look, it's I'm dealing with this too. Like, I don't have as much control as you might think.
Yeah, because he was basically a puppet one. I mean, he's being misused. You look at these people, and I've met not a lot of people, who have had a lot of accomplishment. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have met a lot of actors, very well-known people, and
cool.
Be involved with a lot of these people. And what I think is really interesting here is, you want to understand something, that when we look at our heroes, it's great if they've got something, but sports heroes are a bit different, maybe, but let me tell you something. Neil Armstrong, can you imagine that they pointed that thing out there and they were like, I hope they did it with way less computing power than this thing that I hold in my hand, like way less.
Very true.
Like an abacus, basically. And so you sent those people out, and there's a bit that people almost don't even understand, is that the ice water in his veins, right? They are landing the Eagle. They're putting that thing down on the moon, and they don't even know if they're going to land and just sink in the moon. I mean, none of this they knew, right?
Right.
And as they're coming into land, he's like, I don't like those rocks there. And he moves it, the lander across it, and then he lands on the other side with maybe 2 seconds of fuel left, right?
That's right. I forgot.
And when he did
that.
it, he only had about 17, and you can hear them on the other side. He says, the Eagle has landed. And then the other guy on the other end goes, Neil, you got a bunch of people about to turn blue down here, right? Because they knew what he had done. Now I want to meet that guy, right?
Right.
That's the guy I want to meet. The guy that literally was the first person to do it, but landed the craft like that. That's somebody that's special. And so we have all this idolizing of people that are.
Oh,
I've done a thing. We should care about people that we meet. We should idolize people that are real and valuable to us.
That's a great sentiment. I'm really glad you said that. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, honestly, part of why I'm started this podcast is I do want to expand the breadth of people that we talk to, or hear stories about. I'm so thrilled that you came on. I'm gonna throw a couple more questions your way. So one more Ninja Turtles thing. From my research, it looks like you did one Turtles issue, issue number 43, and then you wrote an animated short with Kevin Eastman for Nickelodeon. It's got like 9 million views on YouTube.
Yeah. I directed it as well. It was fun.
That's really cool. Did that scratch the itch, or do you have a TMNT story in the back of your mind?
It scratched the itch to the most extent. I mean, I don't have a lot. I mean, I think that Kevin and I talked about lots of different ideas. Actually, the one that we ended up doing was not the one that we both really kind of wanted to do.
Right.
We did the one that Nickelodeon liked the most, but the one that we wanted to do was different. We always got the brother humor between them. We loved the conversations that Kevin and I had would always be laughing about, because what brothers do, there's almost like there's a very trite kind of concept that, the brothers will go, wow, you're stupid. Yeah, well, you're ugly. Great. Yeah, well, get lost. All right, I'm leaving. See you later. And then, they go, all right, see you later, fart face. And then he leaves, and they all turn to each other and go, I love that guy. Right?
Yeah.
That's the way that boys are when they're just boys, right? When they're little boys, even grown-ups are like that. The guys will sort of like crack on each other. And so we had this idea where they were at the top of Times Square, and they place a vendor in the middle of Times Square that sells a particular type of pizza that they all want. And it's the best pizza in New York City. And because they're ninjas, the job is to get across Times Square without being seen, buy some pizza, and get back out, which Splinter would hate. And the idea is to like sabotage each other. So as they're trying to get across, one trips the other one, and then everyone looks around, but they've hidden. And it would have been a funny joke. It was just this thing of like brothers being dumb. And right when they get to the pizza place, I think we were going to have April or someone walk up and buy the last piece of pizza and sort of look at them and go like, too bad, boys, and walk off eating the pizza. And it would have been a cute little story because it was all about like brothers and how dumb they can be. And by the time they sabotage each other too many times, all the pizza's gone, which is typical brother, right? We want to tell that story, but I mean, I'm not, there's no itch that I need to scratch with them anymore. I think they've been in my life for 33 years. So.
Wow. That's still cool to know. Definitely. I've got this time with you. I gotta tell you, I always just kind of wanted to just switch the pairings and have have Raph be with Donatello and have Leonardo be with Mikey, you know,
Yeah.
and
People ask me, by the way, which is your favorite Ninja Turtle? Well, which one do you like? Which one do you like?
oh, it's kind of roving. I mean, earlier in life I would have definitely said Michelangelo, but then them all just sort of dealing with their personalities like you talked about, and being a ninja like that. So Leo with sometimes it's Leonardo dealing with just the concept of being a leader and being considered that way, and then sometimes it's Raph just channeling his uh unquenched rage,
Yeah.
to be a good ninja, and he's got the sigh, which, what a thousand tiny cuts for someone who's so angry, to be that precise,
Yeah.
is really fascinating. I think, yeah, I think right now it would probably be Raph, but it changes all the time.
Mine's funny. I think I share this with Kevin. I can't remember. I think maybe Kevin likes Leo. I can't remember. But I always loved Donatello. That was my guy, right? And
Yes.
it was just he was the different one. He had the staff. It was all different, So it's funny because you can adhere to these characters, and I learned a lesson about storytelling very early on when I was working with Ninja Turtles, and my young cousin Billy came over from Britain, and he was a really young little boy. He was only about 5 or 6 years old.
Right.
And in Britain, you couldn't see the film, but it was in America. So he comes over with my Aunt Vivian, and I took him. I mean, I was like royalty to him because I, worked with the Ninja Turtles, and I
Yeah.
took him to the film.
I can't imagine them to
And
be
so he
crazy.
came with me, and he sat on my lap for the
Hmm.
whole time,
Hmm.
and he loved Leonardo. And when Leonardo threw a punch, Billy would throw a punch with him. And
Yeah.
then in the middle of the story, he gets hit. Leo gets hit and hurt, and Billy couldn't believe it. He was devastated.
That's right.
And I'm like, my little cousin is living with this character. He's feeling every punch. He's throwing every punch.
Oh
That
yeah.
taught me something, that people really, really connect to characters. And so I learned a lot from it, just from watching the way people react to this content. But I'm sort of pretty much done with the Ninja Turtles. Not that I'm done. I could tell a story with anybody, but I'm not necessarily climbing to find a way to tell a story with them.
I mean, you say 33 years, that's real time. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
and seeing it from its inception, no less, and that first movie alone, that's a great contribution to the lore, I think. Absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
I've done my time.
yeah, yeah. And it's like it was only planned for one issue, right? Now, 33 years later, that's,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, who'd have thunk, man? Incredible. Very cool. All right, so all right, let me just double check, see if there's any gold I haven't dug for. Are you game for maybe two more questions? Two
Go
more
ahead.
comments? All right, so actually on so some websites are saying that you're still writing Commissioner Gordon and Black Adam. That's in the past, or
Oh, I've
what
done
happened?
those. Yeah, those are finished.
Yeah.
We did a story with Black Adam that I think they knew they were making the movie, and they know kind of the way that I write. So they went, do us a big, flat out kind of get to the core of Black Adam story. And the
Uh-huh.
commission thing was really about like, it was more of an event, but I think that's the kind of book that I don't want to do anymore. I'm not really going to do like crossover events and stuff. There's nothing there for me. I want the reason for doing it other than, oh, it's a crossover, right? So yeah, those are done. The last one I did, I think for DC, I just did one, and then I'm trying to remember what it was because it's like apparently it didn't have a big. Oh yeah, I just did the Arkham Knights. That was good. So I
That's
do
cool.
comics every so often, but I don't do very many of them anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, that's I mean, it's like you said, you did some great work for a long period of time. Yeah, why not explore new sunsets, I guess,
yeah,
I mean, I'm all about the comic book stuff, but like, can certainly see other there's other sunsets, or whatever analogy I'm trying to do here.
yeah.
Okay, so doubling back to Marvel Knights, and Marvel in general, really, was there so you had free reign, right? But ultimately you have to pick and choose. Was there a character you didn't quite get to, that you wanted to do?
So I always felt that I didn't really care what characters were like. That's why, I mean, I'm the weird guy that said no to Spider-Man for a couple of years, and you know, there was one Spider-Man story that I really wanted to do that we didn't do, which I think was a shame. And then there's one character I do regret never having written, but it's a DC character, actually, fun enough.
Yeah,
So
I'm all ears.
the character that I wish I'd written in Spider-Man was the the Hypno Hustler. We had a comedy, right?
Oh,
And it was kind of a dark comedy, and it was about the Hypno Hustler. So he was a product of the 70s, because a lot of times you see characters. So he's a product of the disco era,
wow.
and he had this group called the Harpies, and he would be up on stage and they'd be performing their disco music in the flares, and he had this
Yeah,
big afro, so he was total 70s guy.
yeah.
And they would hypnotize the people in the audience with their music, and they would jump down off stage and then go steal everybody's wallets, and then they would get back on stage and finish, and no one ever knew, right? It was such a great idea. And I'm like, this is the funniest villain, this is the funniest idea. So I had a story in which, the Hypno Hustler had been in jail for a while,
Yeah.
and he gets out. It's actually kind of a sad story in one way. And he gets out,
Mm.
and nothing for him. The world has changed and disco music's dead. And he finds out
Right.
that electronic, EDM producers have recordings of his old music, and they're using it
Whoa.
to hypnotize people in raves. So people are getting all
Wow.
smashed up, and they're taking drugs and they're taking ecstasy and they're doing raves and they're getting hypnotized on his music. And he's like, I want my royalties, man. So he comes back in search of his royalties. And it was kind of it was a great comedy, but it would be about like the sort of wistful wish for things to be the way they used to be, but they can't. The change happens, right? And so, in one level, it's a comedy. I had another one that I wrote with it that I really want to do, which is where, and this was I like comedies of error, right? I really like goofy stories.
Yeah,
Peter
absolutely.
Parker, he wakes up, and for a while I had this neighbor called Karen this blonde woman that was like, we clearly were implying she was a stripper, right? And she dug him. She liked Peter Parker, and she was like always flirting with him. And he's like, I don't know what to make of this, right?
Right,
So
right.
one morning he wake and the joke was that she had a dog called Barker, and the dog is the only person that knew he was Spider-Man. He would come out on his balcony,
Right.
and the dog would be just standing there looking at him, and he'd be like, damn it,
Yeah.
And then the dog would walk inside the room, and then he'd hear the sound of banging, and he was like, I swear that dog's making something in there. And then the dog would come out and look at him. And it was actually based on a dog that I used to live near called Rock. And he was a Rottweiler. I used to go in to his kennel and then come back out. He'd make a lot of noise, then come back out and look at me again. So the idea is that Peter Parker gets, he wakes up one morning and he looks over and he's in bed next to the blonde, and he's like, hang on a minute. And now he can't remember anything that happened the day before. So what's the movie, the one in the wedding where they have to get to the wedding and they can't remember how they got there?
Hangover?
Like that, he has to piece together his day, and he finds out that the piece of cheese that he was keeping in his fridge, he'd eaten a piece of the cheese, and now he'd like gone bananas, right? So there was some fun little comedies that I wanted to do, but the one character that I wanted to write was Hourman. I've always wanted to write. I think one thing that will pull me in comics is if they let me write Hourman.
Hourman. I actually thought you said Owlman for a second.
No, Hourman, yeah, Hourman.
Hourman, yeah. Yeah, he's cool. I gotta. Didn't Jeff Loeb do something with him? Hourman. I don't know,
man. I don't really like comics, to be honest, but yeah.
You're crazy, man. I think you might like him a little bit. All right. So, hang on. All right. So, I really like what you said about this Karen character that you made, because, and it's been touched on a couple times, but in reality, like Peter Parker deals with something that's like, he like there's a couple storylines where like more than one woman is interested in him as a time at a
Yeah.
time, you know, and he
Yeah,
has
back
to
in
like,
the early days, I mean, that was going on, some of the
yeah,
very early stories, yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like, you know, in real life that's tough, right? You know, it's like, you know, like did you sort of like I don't know, like I
My wife is going to see this, so the answer is no before you ask the question, because there's no way.
I wasn't gonna go that far. I just meant in terms of like storytelling. Never mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
Oh,
no, no. I'm
I can tell you, I can tell you a funny anecdote.
yeah,
A buddy of mine from California called me one day, and he had a moment. He told me where he's like everything came together. He's like, for some reason, for about 3 weeks, every woman he met was like, "Wow, I really like you." And he's like, "What do I do with it?" So he figured he'd make hay while the sun shines. And he called me up one night, and he was panicked. I've never heard him panic. He's actually a guy that would normally wouldn't panic. He said, "Man, I got a problem." He said, so I'm in my apartment right now. He said, "I'm in the bathroom right now because I have a girl with me." And I'm like, "Well done, mate. I'm glad, you sort of live
yeah,
vicariously through him. I'm a happily married guy." He said,
right,
"Yeah, but I just got a phone call from this other girl, and I was supposed to meet her across the street in a Brazilian restaurant.
right.
Um, and now I've got the two going on, and I don't know what to do." He said, and he said, "I'm trying to work out what to do, and my ringer buzzes, and it's a third girl, and she's downstairs wanting to come up." And he's like, "I don't know what to do." And I said, "You know what, dude?" I said, I don't know what to do either. But thank you so much for telling me that story." And he was so panicked. He had no
Yeah,
idea what to do. It was brilliant.
yeah, right.
I'm like, "Well, there you go, man. Be careful, right? Don't do that again."
Yeah. Good
There's
night.
good night. I'm out. Good luck with that. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So
yeah. So,
that's a feather in your cap there, and I will also say, you know, I've looked at your social media. You know, you give your wife good compliments from time to time. So you know,
so
I think
I'm the guy who's the most ridiculously happily married man, right? And I will tell you, I got another anecdote. This is a good anecdote too, right? So I'm always, I love my wife. She's beautiful, and she's the mother of my two children,
for
and
it.
we've been together for close to 20 years now, and it's just as good now as it ever was. And
Congratulations.
but
Absolutely.
she is known as nigh perfect, right? And she's really funny. She's quite wacky. She does funny little silly things from time to time. She got like a wacky little brain, and
Yeah.
she's super cute in the way she does it, right? But
Mhm.
the 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 thing that I like, a buddy of mine called me one day, and he said, "I'm really mad at you." And I said, "Well, what are you mad at me for?" And he said, "Well, get this, right? So I'm talking to my wife. He was a married guy, and his wife's beautiful girl, and he said she tried the talk with me. She said to him, she said, "Which of my friends do you find attractive?" And he's like, "No, no, no, I'm not going down that road. There's no way I'm answering that question." And she's like, "Go on, tell me which one." And she's like, "I'm not
Wow.
doing it. This is a trap, right?" So they have this interaction for a few minutes, and she says, "Just pick one of them. Which one do you find attractive?" And he's like, "Let me think." And he sort of picks one that he thinks will be, maybe get him out of trouble, And she goes, "Huh, okay." And so he's thinking, "Well, okay." He said, "Well, is there any of my friends that you find attractive?" And she said, "Yeah, Paul Jenkins." And he's like, "What?" And she said, "The reason that I find Paul Jenkins attractive," he said, "I would like you to talk about me when I'm not there, the way that he talks about his wife."
Oh, imagine you go through all those hoops. You're saying the nice thing,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you're just making other guys mad, you know, for
I got mad, right? But
all that
she just
all
said
that work, you
yeah,
know.
she felt like,
Yeah.
that I mean, my friends have always known that, that I will only ever speak well of my wife, and she's, so this goes back to my days at Spider-Man, especially when I took it over, right? Is that
Hmm.
I wrote him and Mary Jane as a young, happily married couple, right? And
Hmm.
so people were talking about the wedding and undoing it, and it was all a dream and all that stuff. And I'm like, look, what I hated about it was that they wrote them always sniping. Like she didn't want him to be, she was a shrill person that yelled at him for being Spider-Man, and he kept secrets from her. And I'm like, not all married people are like that. There's a scene I did in Spider-Man of them Klingon wedding. There's a scene I did where they go into a store and she can't make the machine stop and it's throwing her stuff on the ground. There's all kinds of funny things. The dog across the street, all of that, and all of that was just stories about me and my wife, just being young and happily married. And we just got married. I met my wife when I was writing Spider-Man, and we got married while I was writing Spider-Man. Right. So
Yeah,
why couldn't we write Peter and Mary Jane as if they were happily married? You know?
totally.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think, I mean, I think that's one of the, you know, kind of like one of the best parts of the fantasy of Spider-Man is like,
Yeah.
that part of his life is good and then he can go save the world,
Yeah, and if
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
happy, you've got the strength. If you have someone that supports you and cares about you, you have the strength to go do these difficult jobs. So yeah, but yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm annoyingly happily married, unfortunately. Sorry, everyone out there. I know you wanted it.
All right, that was fantastic. All right, just one closer. What about Ghost Rider? All of your thoughts, all of your Ghost Rider thoughts.
So I think just as a visual character, that
Mm,
character is great. What a great character! It's a skeleton riding a motorbike.
yeah, yeah,
Amazing. I actually did a Ghost Rider mythos. We did one that we did
right,
the best we could with a background. Um, I think there's no character that couldn't be written well, and I think there's a way to write Ghost Rider. But it's a tough one. Like, not many people have written that's had any
right,
substance. And, I've wanted to write him in the past because I think the visuals of that can be contrasted against the quiet moments of him trying to come to terms with what's happening to him. Right? There's a lot to be done there. But
yeah,
really, well, the way it's treated is, let's just have him jump through flaming hoops on his flaming motorcycle. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, that gets tired after a while. So I like the
yeah.
character. I think it could be done, but it's not, there's not much going on with it sometimes.
I thought I don't know. I haven't. Do you mind if I share with you a Ghost Rider idea?
Please do.
I thought it would be cool if Matt Murdock, Daredevil, died and came back as Ghost Rider.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be a great way of doing it. Yeah,
I thought
I
that would
agree.
be nuts because
Yeah,
he's got all this faith and stuff wrapped up, you
yeah,
know. But
yeah, yeah.
wow, I'm so thrilled to get to talk comics with a guy who's worked on them for a long time, and I appreciate your just your all of your different work, your ideas. And I do want to say, like I kind of reached out to you out of the blue, and you said the first thing you said was, "I'm always happy to help people come up with new content," and that meant a lot. I really appreciated it. It was very cool to really kind of finally turn over these stones, these questions that I had about your Spider-Man run for so long. So thanks so much for coming on, man.
No
Really
problem,
cool.
man. I'm happy that we did the interview, and I hope it does well for you.
Oh, thanks, man. All right. So I'll find a way to reach out to you again at some point. Hope we'll figure something out. Thanks so much, man.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Good
All
night.
right.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye.